I wanted to talk. Keep in mind, this is stuff that I hadn't talked about ever with anyone. Even my therapist, my psychologist that I had been going to, there were things that came up during my MDMA session that I was very comfortable talking about that I had never talked about with my therapist or never gotten close to it. My name is Rogers. I was a patient during the expanded access portion of the FDA trials with MAPS that used MDMA to treat PTSD. I did my treatment at the Pearl Institute with Dr. Raymond Turpin and Kim Skelton, and it changed my life. I was in the Army, and after the military, I went and got a degree in music, and I had a 30-year career as a music producer in the music industry, primarily in Los Angeles and Nashville, Tennessee. I spent a long time running from one project to another, one relationship to another. A series of failures led me to seek out help at the Veterans Administration in Nashville, where I started to go see a therapist, and had a wonderful therapist there and psychiatrist as well. It really helped. I was on pretty typical mental health medication. I was diagnosed initially with major depressive disorder, which was later re-diagnosed as PTSD. That was my life. That was I was told was an incurable thing, and the only way forward is to gain as much knowledge as you can. And it really helped. It made a big difference in my life until I heard about psychedelic assisted therapy just a couple years ago, and I have absolutely, up to that point, no experience at all with any psychedelics. I was very skeptical. I did not really believe what I was hearing, but I kept hearing it. Another psychologist that actually works at the Pearl named David Young, we were on a hike and he had mentioned it again, and my wife Kelly had mentioned this treatment and this trial that was going on, and I should try to sign up and see if I could get in, but the chances of getting in were really slim. Turns out I got in and got my foot in the door, and they welcomed me with open arms. Even up till the first treatment session, I was still very skeptical. I just could not wrap my head around it because I'd spent over a decade in traditional talk therapy and on traditional mental health medications like Wellbutrin and Lexapro and a bunch of others. It was life-changing, profound, and I think that it's a testament to the treatment that I'm even here talking about this, because I kept it all inside for so long and hid it from everyone around me. My best friends, people that I was in professional relationships with and romantic relationships, no one knew. And so it changed my life and changed the trajectory of my life and my career after going through the treatment. And case in point, I haven't had one nightmare since the very first MDMA treatment that I had, and I haven't taken any medication since then either, which is pretty remarkable. It's been a real game changer for me. I'm a true believer, if you want to call it that. I know it's not a perfect thing. I still feel things the way that I felt them before, but I recognize them more now than I did in the past when things start to spin up, and I'm able to deal with it in a way that I couldn't deal with it before. So it's been very powerful, and I'm incredibly thankful for the Pearl and for Dr. Turpin and Kim Skelton and the whole team over at the Pearl. They've saved my life in many ways and made my quality of life exponentially better than it was. And it was already pretty good, but now I've found peace. I like to say that the treatment that I had before finding psychedelic assisted therapy, the traditional psychotherapy and medication stuff really helped, but it didn't heal. I went back through with Dr. Turpin and just to check my numbers and everything of the amount of medication on average that I took over a decade for over a decade, and it was a little over 2 million milligrams of medication, which comes out to, as it turns out, to be about 2.6 pounds, if you can imagine. The amount of dosage that I took of MDMA was just, so minuscule compared to that. And so you just put those two things next to each other. One looks like a 2.5 pound cantaloupe, and the other one looks like a couple of erasers. It's just really an amazing thing when you look at it like that, and just the amount of time that this has given back to me. And time is our greatest resource. This treatment has really helped me find peace. And as I've said multiple times before, something that my dad always told me is that peace of mind is the softest pillow. And this has helped me find peace. I'm very thankful. The treatment sessions were very different than I expected, but again, the setup was well described. There were 3 lead-up sessions before the actual medicine sessions. I knew what to expect, and it went pretty much the way that I was told. In my case, there was a bed type thing, a futon that had been laid out in the middle of the room, and each clinician was on either side of me, to my right and to my left. And they had mentioned, if you need to reach out, and hold hands or have somebody's hand on your shoulder, or that kind of thing. It's very common, and not to be afraid to ask for that if you need that. In my case, I didn't. I kept actually my hands very much like on my chest, and that was a recommendation by Dr. Turpin, I think, or maybe Kim Skelton had mentioned that, like that it's a kind of a self-hug type thing, and it was very helpful for me. But I had my shoes off, had a blanket on me for part of the time, I think, and eye shades, headphones. And it was a very quiet setting, very peaceful, and I had already established somewhat of a relationship with the 2 clinicians that, within the clinical setting, somewhat of a relationship to feel comfortable talking to them. We had talked about some deep and difficult things leading up to my first medicine session, and I felt very comfortable with them. That's what my session was like, and I didn't really feel the need for much contact. Again, that's something I think that's very common. As far as communication goes, it's really interesting. Like, I wanted to talk. Keep in mind, this is stuff that I hadn't talked about ever with anyone. Even my therapist, my psychologist that I had been going to, there were things that came up during my MDMA session that I was very comfortable talking about, that I had never talked about with my therapist, or never gotten close to. I'd gotten maybe taken a few steps towards it, but it was so uncomfortable that I would want to break the door down and get out of the room. But before I broke the door down, I would want to destroy everything in the room. That's the feeling that I had. I never did that, but that's what it felt like on the inside when this thing would start to try to claw its way out of me. And this was so different. And so I would come to a realization when I was inside of the medicine. And I'm not sure what the timeline was. Time is slowed down, if you will. I would come to a realization or have an aha moment, and I would want to talk to my therapist about it, my clinicians that were there with me. And it was incredible. I would take the eye shades off, the headphones, like, oh, this thing just happened. Or I just thought about this thing, or witnessed this thing in my mind, and here's what I think about it now, and this is the understanding that I have about it. And I'd want to talk about it, so I would talk to them about it. They would take notes, maybe ask some questions, but the interaction was pretty, I want to call it hands-off. They were really letting the medicine do what it's so good at doing, and they are so good at guiding these treatments. I like to call it a soft nudge this way, maybe a soft nudge that way, but it was all driven by the conversation, what I was saying. So there weren't as much suggestions as were like, hey, this is the realization that I just came to, and I'm like floored by that. And it was like, well, maybe you might want to continue to go deeper into that if that feels right. It was that type of suggestion which was really helpful, I found. There weren't a lot of questions, there wasn't a lot of back and forth. That really allowed me a lot of latitude to explore. I found it to be very helpful. I wasn't being challenged on anything, and I didn't have to answer a lot of questions. And so I was just given this kind of wide open space to really explore where the medicine was taking me, and I found it to be quite helpful in that. The MDMA, as I learned, shuts down 95% of your amygdala, so your fight or flight is diminished greatly. Because of that, when these things came up, I didn't have the desire to break the door down or destroy everything in the room. I had the desire to understand, to sit with it, and also to talk about it with my clinicians as I would come to these realizations. I would see things that were not like a hallucination in the way that a lot of people think about it. It was more like a film strip. Like when you think about a memory that you had, an experience that you had, and you play it back in your head, completely sober, unaltered. It's like a film strip. You can play it out. It may not be completely accurate, but it's pretty close. That is what these thoughts were like, what these visions, if you want to call it that, were really like. We're really more like these vignettes of these film strips that were shattered in these, locked up in these boxes and shattered, that had been put back together by this medicine and by these therapy sessions with my therapist. It really allowed for all of that and set all of that up. And so I was able to watch these things play out again in a way that I hadn't been able to really since these things happened. And some of these were from my childhood as well, and I just hadn't thought about them since then. I think I had locked them up and stayed as far away from them as I could, and that helped me survive. That was my survival strategy. Shutting down the amygdala really allowed for that and allowed for me to talk about it. Just the fact that I could talk about it was a remarkable turn of events. It really made a huge difference in those sessions. A couple of the other kind of technical things that happened during these sessions, they were tracking my blood pressure, my oxygen levels. They were in contact with a primary care doctor that was on call the entire time. So I was absolutely expecting a rave type situation because of my lack of experience actually ingesting MDMA or any psychedelics. My only experience with it has been in and around recording studios when artists would partake in different substances and that kind of stuff. And I had actually seen some truly magical moments happen when artists were in these altered states. I've seen very negative things happen as well, but also these really magic moments where people could really open up and expose themselves as artists. And so I had a understanding of it, but my belief was probably like many people, neon necklaces and Burning Man kind of stuff and that kind of thing. It was nothing short of judgmental and skewed from the reality of what I experienced, which was, I think a lot of that had to do with the setting of intentions and the therapy sessions that led up to the actual medicine session. They were just as difficult as they were before with regular psychotherapy, maybe even more difficult because I had to taper off of my mental health medication. I was there with two people that I had grown to trust, and they were skilled at guiding me through expectations. And when the actual medicine session happened, it was just deeply profound and remarkable how I could go inside and open these boxes that had been locked for decades. It was a moment of, wow, I really wish that everyone who has had trauma could experience this. And we have all had trauma. We have all experienced trauma on one level or another. It was just nothing short of remarkable. I did not feel high. I did not feel out of control. I did not have a desire to, at least from my experience, data point of one here, I did not have a desire to get up and dance around naked or do any kind of crazy things like that the very few friends that I had told about this experience that I was going into, I got a lot of the jokes and a lot of the things, but none of those things happened. And I didn't expect them to once I actually got into the program and had learned more about it. The most remarkable thing was this feeling that I wanted to stay in the box, in the locked box. I had opened it and I wanted to look at it from every angle. And I had never experienced that before. What I've learned is that my brain was putting language to trauma. These shards of glass that were inside of this box that represented different experiences in my life that would cut you if you put your hand in the box. You could see little bits of a experience, but not the whole picture. All of these things just locked together. and made sense, and were still sad and hard and difficult, but I was in a place that I wanted to stay inside of it and learn from it and understand it as much as I could and heal from it. And I really felt that. But even more remarkable than that was the 2 weeks that came after the medicine session. There's an integration session right after your medicine session, after each one, which is incredibly helpful. The clinicians that are with you kind of read back some of the things that you talked about, some of the things that you had mentioned, and they sent me home with a game plan, if you will. Not you have to do this or you have to do that. There were more suggestions, absolutely incredibly helpful. But those 2 weeks afterwards, I literally felt like I was gaining understanding at a speed that was continuing to increase. The medicine session was 10 miles an hour, and the 2 weeks after were this kind of ramp up to this 100 miles an hour of understanding. Like, oh, that's why I reacted that way. Oh, that's why that person reacted this way to my reaction. It was the most helpful time, and has continued to be helpful. I'm a year and a half out from the end of my my treatment program, and I think differently, I process things differently, I am much calmer on the inside, and therefore much truly calmer, not just putting up a facade of being calm and happy or whatever. And I'm able to stay within conflict in a way that I wasn't able to before. So for me, it was the time after the medicine sessions that were the most profound and the most helpful. And those were the things that I was looking forward to the most. It wasn't the medicine session themselves, although that was I knew that was the catalyst that would drive this thing forward. All the technology is awesome. I use the technology all the time. Like I'm a part of that, and have been working with computers in music since 1994, professionally, 1995, whatever. But the fact is that things break, things fail, batteries die. If you don't know how to read a map, if you don't know how to trust yourself, then things can go bad really fast. And bad is all relative. Bad might be you lost your car in the parking lot and the battery died on your key fob and you can't find your car. You know, that could be a bad situation. And I'm not making fun of that situation. Bad could also be that your phone dies and your battery dies and you're stuck in a city that you don't know, and you end up in not a great place. You end up walking down the wrong road or whatever, and you become a target. I think that we need to find our way back to ourselves, and that all comes from curiosity and humility. I can make great music with great artists and all that stuff inside the computer, but when it comes right down to it, it's really about, can you sit down with a piano or guitar and write a song? Yes or no? Without any other technology around it. That's what it really comes down to. The human voice, which is inside you, That's the thing that working with singers, I'm not a singer, but it's the most personal instrument is the human voice and the human body for drummers and rhythmic players, percussion players, that kind of stuff. It takes a lot of bravery to trust yourself, but I will tell you that every bit of bravery and courage that you will ever need is already inside you. And once you believe that, then that's a path to that inner voice of confidence, of capability. I believe it now, but even as I say this out loud, it's hard for me to wrap my head around the fact that it really continues to heal. It's just as I keep saying, a remarkable, deeply profound experience. And my hope is that everyone that needs it will have access to it. And everyone who seeks out treatment of this kind, or treatment of the traditional sense, is able to work their way towards this to find healing. I think that my treatment within the traditional sense was helpful in at least in being able to talk with the clinicians and kind of understand some of the theories and some of the thought process that went into the integration sessions and afterwards. It was helpful for me. It's not helpful for everybody, but the MDMA treatment it literally changed my life. So what helped me the most in integration was this process of box breathing that allowed me to to drop in to, I call it a flow state, being a musical person and music being my passion, and it's the thing I'm always chasing when I'm songwriting or recording with artists, is to try to get into the flow state. I have found that since doing my treatment, it is much easier. It's not always accessible and it's not easy every time, but it is much easier than it ever has been before in my life. And I've been doing this for a decent amount of time. I know what I'm doing, and this thing has just changed so much for me. The integration for me, what really works the best is some kind of breathing exercise. For me, it's box breathing, and to be in a quiet, safe place, a bedroom, for me, it's lean up against the wall in a space that I'm comfortable in. Bedroom works good for laying down, whatever, this kind of stuff, and some kind of music on or some kind of thing. That doesn't always work for people, so it depends, but a breathing exercise to kind of set the stage to allow these things to happen. You're thinking about your breaths, you're counting in a lot of these exercises, and because you're doing that, you can't think about other things. So if you're counting and you're breathing, it's the only thing you can think about. And so it really helps you kind of shut everything else down or quiet all the other voices that are going on in your head, all the other noise that's happening from your day or the night before, or whatever it is. That's what helps me the most. I find that if I have specific music or specific sound on, I'm able to concentrate, whereas some of the music can be incredibly disruptive and makes you think about other things or spins you up in a different way than you really need to be able to get down into a thought process or to find the flow state. I think that the tool that it shined a light on for me was trust and self-assurance. So to trust you hear people say, trust your gut. You know, your gut's rarely wrong, and I think that that's true. I think that we're wired just from an evolutionary standpoint to know when the hair stands up on the back of your neck, or to know when these things that have been defined as atmospherics are happening. Don't go down that alley, that kind of stuff. We are very far away from trusting those things in modern society. I think that that's been maybe the last 100 years, maybe the last 50 years, we've gotten so far away from it. As we've gotten so far away from nature, we're not on farms anymore, we're in cities, and we use technology and all of that. And if you were to trust yourself and trust your gut, it brings self-belief. That brings a confidence, not an arrogance, but a confidence of capability. So if you put your phone down, you can probably guess after a while kind of what time it is. You can probably guess how to get somewhere without a map. It has brought me back to this place of self-assurance and trust in myself. That's the biggest tool that it has brought to me, if you want to call it that, if you want to talk about it in that sense. It shined a very, very bright light. It shined a lot of sunlight on my inner center, the inner belief that I have in my capabilities. Since my treatment, I have been able to get into or close to this flow state much more frequently or easier. And again, I want to be really cautious about saying it's easy. I'm able to at least get close to it. It's the thing in my career that I've been chasing every time I work with an artist, every time I write a song, or in the studio. I'm always chasing this flow state and chasing these kind of, it's easy to do something good. It's very difficult to do something special. So I'm always chasing that, and in the flow state you can find these special moments, these kind of magic moments that you didn't expect. And the treatment has allowed me to get closer to that on a more regular basis, and I think that's just because it's, in one sense, it's slowed me down, it's slowed my thought process down. Conversation that I had with my dad that I was reminded of when I was in my treatment, when I was in one of my medicine sessions. The day I was leaving for the military, and I was scared, and I was asking my dad a lot of questions. He had spent over 20 years in the military, and so I was somewhat familiar with it, but just as a kid, not as an adult stepping into this thing. And I asked him what was the most important thing in life, and he said humility. And if you show up with humility to every situation, if you remember that, then you're going to listen before you're going to talk. And if you listen, you're going to learn something from the people that are talking, and you're going to gain empathy for them. You're going to gain some more understanding, because they're all going to be different. And if you have that empathy, then it's much easier to understand them, or understand maybe where they're coming from. This treatment has really reminded me of that, the importance of being humble and show up with humility. It's affected everything. It's definitely affected my professional career. It's changed the trajectory of my entire career. I'm showing up to every single situation now when I'm approaching a new sound that I'm trying to create for a new treatment with humility. I absolutely love being humbled by things now in a way that I didn't before. It's allowed me to slow down and take things in a way that I wouldn't have before and couldn't have before. That has brought me a great deal of inner peace and a great deal of my own personal understanding about myself and about, I think, those around me. I've gained more empathy for people around me, and that wouldn't have happened without the MDMA treatment. In the integration sessions and when I was on my own, I found that some of the music was really helpful and some of the music was really disruptive and not helpful at all. And I found that to be the case in the medicine sessions as well. Some of it was really helpful, and some of it just took me completely out of what I was trying to focus on. And I was very hesitant to say anything after my first medicine session because I figured I was biased. I mean, music has been my life, it's been my career, and it's something that I'm very passionate about and I understand deeply. So I just figured it was me, but I drummed up enough courage to mention something to Dr. Turpin. When I found a piece of music that really worked, or one was played for me out of the playlist, it allowed me to go deeper. It allowed me to focus on why I was there and allow the medicine to kind of take me where it was meant to take me. And then there was silence in between the songs. And I found the silence to be incredibly scary. Much like a scary movie, the quiet parts are usually the scariest, and you have, eye shades on and headphones on, so all of your senses are really kind of removed. And I did not like that at all. And worst of all was when there was a good piece of music, it's like, what's coming next? And so I'm thinking about what's coming next instead of thinking about the treatment that I was there for. And my clinicians were having to fast forward or turn up, turn down, and that kind of thing didn't really resonate with me that much. But some of it was really helpful. That led me, after my last treatment session, it led me to a question of, if not, why not? If this is the best that they have, these playlists were curated for this trial and for this specific treatment. And if it's not working absolutely as best as it can, why can't we make it better? It's an example of all of these roads coming together for me that I wasn't looking for. I thought that I was on a path and on a road to just be who I was, where I was with my PTSD and my treatment, with regular talk therapy and regular mental health medication. And then this other road appeared about psychedelic assisted therapy. And during that treatment, this other road appeared about the music and the playlists that are being used within it. I went on about a 4-month deep dive, full-on nerd fest to try to create something that was better, that would allow, the whole idea was to allow the patient to focus 100% of their energy on their trauma and allow the medicine to focus its 100% of its energy essentially on that as well, and to allow the clinicians to focus 100% of their energy on the patient and what the patient is going through, instead of any of their energy, 5%, 10%, 20%, whatever it is, on music. I think there's a better way, and I have created sound now specifically designed for psychedelic assisted therapy, MDMA, psilocybin, and ketamine, that allows for this. The company that I've started, we've filed a process patent for it, and we've come up with something that we think really works better and allows for this. And my hope is, and my goal is, the why is so that treatment is better for those that come after me. I think this is an absolutely amazing road forward for trauma and healing, and if I can help make it 1% better or more, then I want to do that. I want to contribute to leave this place a little bit better than I found it. It wasn't consistent. I was assuming that it was going to be consistent just based on personal likes, different genres, and things that I like more than others, or things that I dislike more than others. It changed and was dependent on things I'm probably not smart enough to understand why, as far as why those things changed at that time. I remember Dr. Turpin and Kim Skelton telling me that the medicine will take you where you're supposed to go. My guess is that the different dosages and the different ways that my body was metabolizing those dosages would change the way that that sound and music was hitting me. So my guess is that it changed based on those things and based on my healing journey, I guess. I'm not really sure. I'm making some assumptions there. But the fact is that we have been listening to music since we were in the womb. There are reminders even before we're born about this rhythm feels that way. My mom who carried me, even if you don't know it, it's like this subconscious thing. I believe that there was a fight, there was a car crash, and this song was on, and those things will affect you. Music can remind you of things like nothing else. Photographs, film, whatever. There's nothing as powerful as music to remind you of a certain emotion, a certain feel about what was going on at that moment, that you had some kind of impact, positive, negative, whatever. You can take anyone who doesn't know anything about music at all, play a cello for them, and they will be able to tell you that that's a cello. They may not even know what the instrument is, but they recognize it. It's around us all the time, different rhythms, different things. And so if there's a certain drum beat, a certain tempo, a certain harmonic structure, these things pull your brain. Music is designed and incredibly powerful at manipulating your emotions, turning a bad mood into a good mood and vice versa, a benign mood into a romantic mood just based on music. I think that pulling a lot of those triggers out, the triggers can be good and they can also be bad, but pulling a lot of that out was the goal in a lot of ways. It was the direction I was headed in creating the sound for the therapy. And I think it's where there's no identifiable rhythm structure, tempo, no identifiable harmonic structure, no identifiable instrument, and no silence. Now there are parts where it's super quiet, but there isn't any silence. And I have found in other patients that have used it since I created it, that it's been incredibly helpful to allow them to really get further inside of the medicine and further inside of their treatment. After my third medicine session, it was a few weeks after that, right around the time that I realized that I didn't want to drink alcohol anymore. Alcohol became like a country that I've never been to and had no desire to go to. Like it was like the whole experience had been lifted out of my body. And when I mentioned this during one of my follow-on integration sessions or meetings with my clinicians, it was suggested that, well, it might be your brain telling you that you don't need it anymore. And that made so much sense to me. That allowed me to kind of put it into context. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And it was around that time that this idea, this if not, why not question popped into my head out of the blue. And I attribute it to the treatment because there wasn't a lot of other noise going on in my head. It was during one of these breath work sessions that I was doing on my own. It was really, wait a minute, this is something that you know and you might be able to help. You might be able to find a better way forward. It wasn't arrogant, it wasn't pompous. There was very much like, maybe you can and maybe you should try. I love being a beginner at things and I love being humbled by things, and I figured this was gonna give me those things in large doses. So the very first thing I thought of was old school computer monitor screensavers that just changed colors. But they changed colors so slowly that you couldn't tell when blue becomes indigo. You would not be able to point it out. But you kind of you recognize the colors and stuff, but it's changing at such a slow pace in this kind of linear fashion. It didn't draw your attention to it. There wasn't anything that flashy about it, but it was constantly changing. The next time you recognize it, it's a red or whatever colors. And so can I create something that is similar to that, but from a sound standpoint? That was my first initial thought process. And then the biggest challenge was, can I create sound without recognizable sounds? So can I have instrumentation that's manipulated enough in a way that myself as a music professional and a musical person can't even recognize what the cello is? How can I do that, and how can I find a way to penetrate the patient the most effective way possible to create a feeling of safety, a safety blanket, if you will? I was reminded in my head, again during one of these integration sessions, that I had recorded humpback whales early on in my career. My dad was a career naval officer, was on submarines, and we used to talk about sonar all the time. And he described these things about how they would hear whale sounds that were, miles away, and how the whales knew which frequencies to use at which volume to go a specific distance. Absolutely wild. That popped into my head. Now, I hadn't thought about that since I was probably a kid. I think it's very much has to do with the treatment that I went through with the MDMA treatment, and just bringing these moments of clarity just became more and more and more frequent, and continue to be that way. When I get down into deep thought about something, I want to try to solve a problem. I went back to these whale recordings and identified specific frequencies that they were using, the whales that were off the coast to drive salmon into these coves, and then the whales that were in closer that would continue to do that. Pretty wild, but that's where I started, because sound travels 5 times further and 5 times faster through water than it does through air. And we're made up primarily of water. If that's true in water, then it's probably true for us as bodies. So how can I start there with those kind of frequencies and then work my way up and build something? And that's how I did it. There's a naturalness to it that settles us down and can make us feel safe. I think again about something my dad told me, that the 2 things are very true in life. 2 things you can't fuck with is Mother Nature and love. Like, you're gonna love who you're gonna love, and you cannot predict the power of Mother Nature. And the fact that there are whales that know what frequency to send a message 5 miles away to a pod of whales that, hey, the salmon are coming and I'm gonna drive them towards you, is just unbelievable to me. That's the power of Mother Nature. And I think that, these frequencies exist in nature. They're around us all the time. The earth itself has a frequency that it resonates at. The wind, trees, all of these things have a resonance, and it's not a concept, it's science fact. I don't know if you put that in the physics category or you put it wherever, but it's real. So 2x4s in a building resonate. All of these things are true, and I think that paying attention to them is very important. I wanted to provide sound for other treatment like ketamine and psilocybin. I've done both of those. I did ketamine at the Pearl Institute, and I figured I couldn't create sound for it if I hadn't done it myself. If I hadn't walked in those shoes, then how could I create sound to address that treatment? I've done both of those now, and they were quite different than the MDMA sessions. And I've been asked this before, if I'm curious about going further, I'm curious about other modalities, if that's the right word to use. I wouldn't call it a curiosity more than a knowing that there are things in nature and there are things that we have created that help with mental health in a way that is so much more powerful than the traditional SSRIs, at least in my own experience. I would call it more of a road that I'm on than a kind of casual curiosity. I'm very invested in this new journey and this new turn of events, and I'm very thankful to be on this road that I'm on. My ketamine one, the psilocybin one, I'm still trying to sort that out. The ketamine experience was, I did that with Dr. Turpin as well. It was a condensed version, really, in a way, of the MDMA treatment. There was intention set in. We talked quite a bit about goals and expectations. Where the MDMA, I remember most of everything. I never felt like I was out of control, any of those types of things. This was like a rocket ship into some other place. Again, my expectations were set properly. I experienced exactly what I had been told might happen. They call it disassociative, but it was, I didn't think about my body or where I was in space and time. And it was a kind of a wave process, if you can imagine large ocean waves, not crashing waves, but just swells of muted colors, deep greens, deep blues, and intense geometrical shapes. They were really intense, really in depth, and not two-dimensional, definitely three-dimensional, and just very, very intense. That would morph into or fade into these deep colors of like denim blues and that type of thing. And sometimes these shapes were imprinted on these colors, and sometimes they weren't. And I found that afterwards it was like, whoa, that just happened, and what just happened? But again, like the weeks afterwards, it felt like there was a deeper understanding and a slowing down of thought process that allowed me to understand things in a way that I hadn't before. And you miss a lot at 100 miles an hour, and you don't miss very much when you're willing to take a nice slow walk. You get to see a lot of things that you otherwise wouldn't have. Without a doubt, for me, 100%, the decade plus of mental health medication that I'd been on, the SSRIs and these things, masked my feelings and didn't heal anything. That is a fact. I think the advice that I would give to any person or corporation, if I was given the opportunity to speak, is to be curious. Do your own research, make up your own mind, gather information from every source, not only the source that you're normally looking at. It's not to say that your source is wrong or biased, but it's good to gather from 3 or 4 different sources so that you can start to paint your own picture. And that would be my approach. It always takes context. I think that it's like trying to describe a painting to somebody, or it's not on this map, but it's over there to the right side of the map kind of thing. You know, it's similar to trying to describe the experience of being in the Army and what that's like. You can't really know without raising your hand. You can't really know what it's like to grow up in a military family as a child, having to move all the time unless you experience it. I try to stay out of the noise as much as I can, but I think that the things that generally make change or change someone's mind is when they have personal experience with it, when they're able to put some kind of context to it. And that seems to change perception into perspective. If your child or your sibling or your parent has mental health struggles, then you know what that's about. If they find healing through traditional means and Western medicine means, whatever you want to call it, SSRIs, then it gives you hope that, oh, there's something here that can help. And just the same way, if that same person finds healing through psychedelic assisted therapy, it's still therapy. If it helps, then it's going to change your perspective about things. And I think that's what it's going to take. Is just for more people to be curious about it. I was disappointed in the FDA decision to kick this thing down the road, kick the can down the road a little bit more and get more studies done. It was painful to see some of the people that I had come to know through my treatment. They had been working on this for decades and were fully committed to it. And at the same time, if we gain more understanding and we're able to, through this kicking the can down the road, actually brings us even more understanding and more clarity, which it will, then maybe in the end it's a good thing that they get to a place where it's absolutely undeniable. I think we're already there. I think the trials that were done and all the studies that were done already show that it's undeniable, that it helps in a way that traditional therapy and traditional medication does not. And it heals in a way that these other traditional approaches do not. That is a fact. That has been proven multiple times through multiple trials and multiple studies. And but if it takes one more to get us there, then it takes one more to get us there. Nothing worth doing is ever easy. And this is worth doing. And healing is worth struggling for. And I think to honor the people that have worked in this industry for a long time, under the radar, at threat of legal ramifications and everything else, losing relationships over it because they're in the psychedelic space or whatever. I think to honor them, it's worth fighting for. And if that means it's going to take another year or 2 or 10, it's worth doing because it heals. And this other approach that we have been on, this other road we have been on, helps, but it does not heal.
Thank you for watching, and please remember to like this video and to subscribe to our channel.
For more information or to make a donation towards our cause, please visit our website.